Welcome back, statistics scholars. Today we're going to be learning to use PSPP to do simple data transformations. Essentially using PSPP to recode the values in our variables. As a reminder, PSPP is the free open source version of the proprietary IBM SPSS. The interface is really similar and the kind of analyses you can do are really similar. As a reminder, the columns in PSPP represent the different variables on which people, because I'm a psychologist, might differ. But you can use PSPP to measure anything, doesn't have to be people, where there's some variability, right? Where your observations can vary. For me, I'm a psychologist, so I study people. So in this little snapshot here, I've got height and weight. And so height is a variable, weight is a variable. So each column represents a way that some specific people or observations can be different. Each row then here represents an individual observation. So in my case, an individual person, right? Person 1 was 78 inches, person 2 was 79 inches, person 3 was 160 pounds, etc., etc. So up to this point, if you've been watching my PSPP videos, we have only really explored analyze. Because right here at the top of PSPP, you can see there's a bunch of different options, and the only one that we've really looked at so far is analyze. But today, we're going to click on transform. And what you'll see is that under transform, you have a couple of different options. We are going to explore the recoding option, where we are going to take the values that have already been entered into PSPP and we're going to change them into something else. We're going to recode them. And there's a wide variety of reasons why you might do this. Some analyses are not real happy when there's a bunch of zeros, so you might want to get rid of zeros and give it a different number. Some analyses work better if you only are dealing with positive numbers, so you might want to recode your values to get only positive numbers. We are going to use PSPP to take a string variable and turn it into a still qualitative, still a nominal variable, but we're going to recode it to give it a numerical value. That's what we're going to use it for, because oftentimes when you give someone a survey and you want them to sort of type in a free response answer, like what's your occupation, or whether or not you volunteer, what's your gender, and you want to allow them the freedom to just type in an answer, PSPP unfortunately can't speak string. It can't speak the word. So we're going to have to recode those values into numbers that act as placeholders in order for PSPP to analyze that group variable, that qualitative nominal variable. So let's see how that's done. So if you've been watching PSPP, you'll remember that under variable view, you can either have a numerical value or a string value type of variable. And if you're in working with me, you might have typed in a gender as a string, or you might have typed in occupation as a string. We're going to use PSPP to recode that. And we're essentially going to transform. We're going to transform all of the different words into a placeholder number. Now, again, the number doesn't have value. It doesn't have a numerical meaning. The numbers really do just stand in. Two common coding schemes are what's called dummy coding, which uses a series of zeros and ones to stand in for a qualitative variable, or effect coding, which uses negative ones and positive ones. There are two different kinds of codes that you can use to take group-based variables like gender, or whether or not someone volunteers, or what's your favorite color, to take a group-based variable and essentially replace the words that are the answers and replace those with numbers so that PSPP can analyze that group-based variable. But again, the variable will still be qualitative, the variable will still be nominal, it will still be a group-based variable. We're just using numbers as a placeholder. So again, and once you click transform, because that's how we're going to do it. You click on the transform option on the top. You're either going to choose recode into the same variable or recode into different variables. And here's the skinny. on these two options. If you recode into the same variable, what PSPP is going to do for you is it's going to take the pre-existing column of data and it's going to overwrite it. It's going to literally replace all the values in the variable you've already created. If you recode into a different variable, it's going to take the recoded values and create a brand new column of data. And so you have to decide, do you never want to see your old string words again? When you might want to recode into the same variable, right? But I usually just recode into this different variable because I like to save the actual original column of data. I like to save that. So I almost always choose recode into a different variable. But there could be good reasons to code into the same variable. Like, for example, if you have missing data, you can actually use this option to fill in missing data with a placeholder value or fill in missing data with the average, or oftentimes if you're working with an external survey program, it will automatically make missing data a particular number, like 999,000 or something like that. And so you would recode into the same variable to replace that placeholder number with, in fact, a missing data point. So it's not that recoding into the same variable is never used. It's just, for our purposes, I usually just recode into the different variable to save the original data and then have a new column with my recoded values. So let's explore that. So we're going to recode into a different variable. And if you're working with my example data sets from my students, when you choose that, you'll see this pop-up window. And essentially, here's what the values are. Here over here, you have all the different long form questions that we asked people. And essentially, you're going to choose one of the variables to recode. And you're going to toggle using this little arrow here to toggle it over here to the right. And then we're going to give it a new name here, because we're going to, again, recode into a different variable. We can't use the same column name. We'll have to give it a new name. Essentially, it's going to be like input and output. And so it's going to have the old name, and then we're going to tell it what its new name is going to be. And then also we're going to do old and new values. And it's going to be this button that will allow us to recode. Take the old values and then recode it. And at this point, I wanted to show you one of the little options in PSPP. The default option in PSPP, at least most versions of it, is when you're manipulating your data, when you're analyzing your data or transforming your data, whatever you're doing to it, it gives you the long form, what's called the variable label form. If you've given your variables not just names, which is the short form that you see in data view, but actually given it a label in variable view, it's actually going to the default is actually show you the big long label. But if you actually want the shorter name, you can just uncheck that by right-clicking. By right-clicking in this field right here, you can right-click it and then uncheck this box, and it will give you the short form, which is what I've done here, right? I've unclicked this, and actually I find that easier to work with. Because I give my variables names that make sense, like age is age, sibs refers to siblings, so I don't need the big long labels. But if you code your variables as something like some weird code like S12, you might want to then view the variable label. So you would keep this check to remind yourself of what variable you're looking for. So you can actually go back and forth between those two different views. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to recode the gender variable from our original data set. So what I've done is I pulled gender from here on the left, and I've gone ahead and pulled it to the right, again, using this little toggle here. Because if you've been working with me in several videos, you know that gender was coded as a string variable, which means I let people just type in a word. I said, tell me what your gender is. So people could tell me male, people could tell me fluid, people could tell me non-binary. I let people choose whatever gender they wanted. But now I'm going to recode those words into numerical values as a placeholder so PSPP can analyze that group-based variable. So here is the old and new values right here. Here's gender. I'm going to now tell it what I want to be in here. This window will pop up, and you're going to tell it the string variable over here that you want, and then give it the numerical value over here that you want. That's where these things are going to go, and you do have to just type it in. And so in order to do this task, I'm actually going to need a frequency table, which we covered in previous videos, telling me all the different words that people typed in. And so here is, and again, if you want to be reminded of how to get a frequency table, please look at some of my previous videos. And so here is that output from a frequency table. So as you can see, one person put a space and then wrote man, another person typed in female, another person typed in M for male. And so here are all the different strings of word data that is in PSPP. And what I'm essentially going to do is I'm going to use this input to say, okay, man, and I'll type in man here. And then I'm going to put that as, I don't know, let's arbitrarily make any male or men response -1. So this person is going to get a -1. This person is going to -1. Male is going to get a -1. So all of these 9 people that typed in male, that male is going to be replaced by a -1. I don't have any non-binary or gender fluid people in this data set. I really have about 58 people who are, 57 people who answered, one person who didn't because there's nothing here. I had 57 people answer this question with some form of man, woman, male, female. So I'm going to combine all the men, males, and M's together and all the women, woman, females together. I'm going to combine those into 2 groups. And I'm going to use what's called an effect coding scheme, where I turn anybody who gave me a male or man or male, man, M response and turn them into -1s, and anyone who gave me a woman, female, female, woman, women response and turn them into positive ones. It's called an effect code. And please keep in mind that PSPP is case sensitive at least when dealing with a string variable. So I'm going to have to actually replace 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm going to have to actually recode 12 different things in PSPP. And so let's go back to that little window here. So here's where I've typed in man. And over here, under this value over here, this is like the input. It says, I'm telling PSPP, find any on the gender variable, right? On the gender variable, because that's what we chose up here, right? On the gender variable, anytime you see the string man, replace it with a -1. And once I've typed in man here, once I've typed in -1 here, I click add. And that adds that right here. And then I repeat this process for all of the different values that I saw in my frequency table. So what I like to do is either print out this frequency table, or if you're very fortunate and are working with 2 screens, wouldn't that be great? I would have the frequency table over here on the left, and I would have PSPP here on the right. Either way, I'm going to be looking at this frequency table while I create this input and output recoding logic. And so I've gone ahead and shown, I'm going to repeat this process for all of the different values I saw in the frequency table. And so as you can see, I've created a recoding scheme. I've added these all to the input and output logic. Man will become -1, female will become 1, M will become -1, male will become -1, man will become -1, women will become 1, and on and on and on, based on this frequency table that I grabbed of my string variable for gender. And so I'm going to create a numerical variable. It's still qualitative, it's still nominal. It's just I'm turning it into a numerical value so that PSPP can analyze the data. And so the way I'm going to do that then is by checking this button here. See this little toggle here? Right here, I'm going to make sure that's checked, because what you're essentially telling PSPP is this used to be a string variable where people could type in whatever they want, but I'm turning it into a qualitative, group-based numerical variable where the numbers are simply placeholders. And I'm using an effect coding scheme with -1s representing any man or male response and +1s representing any woman or female response. So I make sure this little button here is checked. Convert numeric strings to numbers. And so once I've done that, I click continue, click, and that brings me back to my original window. And this is where I now have to rename my variable. I'm essentially, gender is the input variable, where I have a bunch of old and new values. And now the output variable is, I'm going to call it gen underscore RC. Why? Because it's going to be the recoded variable. So gen RC or gen underscore RC, whatever moves you. And then I click the change button. And once I've done that, it's going to actually give me the old variable name as well as the new variable name right here at the top once I click change. And once I've done that, I'll click OK. And it's not going to show you the OK, by the way. It's not going to give you this option until after you've actually given it an output variable name. So once you have, you click OK, and now you'll have a new column of data, a brand new column of data that's going to have ones and negative ones, where negative ones can, again, represent our self-identified men, and positive ones representing our self-identified women. And so just to check my work, and this is again a little tiny snapshot of the data view to show you that the new variable has been created. Here, and just to give a sense of what it looks like, here is, I created 2 new frequency tables. Here is a frequency table with the of the original variable. And then here is a snapshot of the frequency table now for our new variable gen RC. I only have negative ones now and positive ones now. And so because I've recoded everything. And now I can see there were 25 men in my course and 31 women in my course, which was really hard to see when I just had this string variable, right? I've recoded things to get a better sense of what's happening. And also, again, PSPP can only speak number, so I have to convert all of my string variables into group-based numerical variables, as I have done here. And that is how you recode. And again, there's a wide variety of reasons why you might want to recode, but certainly turning string variables into group-based numerical variables is a very useful functionality in PSPP. So real quick, I'm going to show you in PSPP how I did this live. All right, so here we are in PSPP output, and I've taken the liberty of getting a frequency table for my variable that asked my students, are you planning on transferring to a 4-year university? And what I had is I had 2 people who said no, 41 people who said yes with a capital Y, and then 15 people who said yes with a lowercase y. I do teach at one of the top transfer colleges in my particular state, and so it's not a surprise to me that almost all of my students want to transfer. In fact, when I ask them where they want to transfer, they all want to transfer to very good schools. So this becomes a pretty easy one to recode. So let's take this variable that has 3 string inputs and recode it so all of the yeses are ones and all of the nos are zeros. So let's go in and practice doing this. So here we are in data view, and I'm going to click on transform, and I'm going to go again to recode into different variables. This is just what I like to do personally because it saves my original string data. So I'm going to recode into different variables. And I'm going to see this pop-up window. And again, I'm going to right-click on this where I do not want to see the labels. I just want to see the variable names. And the nice thing about this is in most versions of PSPP, if you just mouse over, it actually tells you what the label is. So getting the nice short variable name, to me, just is more user-friendly. And then I can just mouse over the name to see the full label. And so what we're going to be then recoding is, again, that transfer variable. So here it is. Are you hoping to transfer? Yes or no? I'm going to pull that over here. And now I'm going to recode the old and new values. So here is that pop-up window again. And I knew I had some yeses. They become ones. And then I click. Whoops. Those become 1. And I click add. So anybody who had a capital yes now becomes a 1. But I know I had some lowercase yeses as well. So I'm going to add that. And then I had 2 no's and, whoops. Ooh. And as you'll recall, I had 2 people who told me no, but they both did it with a capital N. So I only have to recode that one thing. All right, so I type in no here, And then instead of 1, because I don't want those people to be the same value, I'm going to type in 0. And this is called a dummy code. A dummy code is when you use 0s and 1s to represent your different groups. And so I add that over. And so I have, because you recall in my frequency table, I had 3 different string responses: capital yeses, lowercase yeses, and uppercase no's. And so now I'm going to go click continue. Continue is right down here. Click continue. And now I'm back in that original window. But remember, I'm going to have to give my variable a name. So I click on the old name. See how I clicked on it? And now I can give it a new name. So I'm going to call it trans, TRARC. Let's just call it that. TRARC underscore, TRA for transfer underscore RC for recoded. And then I click change. And once I click change, now I have the OK option, right? Because PSPP is sort of validating to make sure you're doing things properly. It wants you to go in there and give it old and new values, and it wants you to give it an output name so it can create your new recoded variable. Now we click OK. And it automatically takes you back into data view. And as you can see, we're back here in data view. And here's that brand new column of data, that new variable. And of course, most people said yes, but here's my, this person, I guess, just didn't give me any data. And that's why they said, no, I don't plan to transfer. I'm not going to give you any answers. But if you cruise down here, this is our one other person who said they weren't planning on transferring, and everybody else gets a 1. Now, with most real variables, you're not going to have this stark split, right? You're going to have more variability. But I thought it would be easy to walk you through a string variable that had really similar responses just to get the mechanics of it. And so that is how you can use PSPP to recode into different variables or same variables. And thank you very much for watching. Have a good one. I hope to see you in our next video.